With the first day of the legal negotiation period in the books, we'll tell you where the Raiders stand with who they agreed to deals with and who they may have lost, where they need to go next. That plus a whole lot more comes up on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for March 12th, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. Of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, we definitely appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day. That's because of you, Raider Nation, which is awesome. We appreciate that. And because of my man, Ari. Ari does a great job each and every day making sure we're on YouTube. We're looking good. We're sounding good. Does a fantastic job. Check him out. Shout him out on Twitter at Ari Producers. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. And as you can imagine, got a ton of feedback on Monday, the first day of the legal negotiation period. It started early and it ended late for the Silver and Black. So we got a lot of feedback. We'll try to get to as much as possible coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll talk about, okay, where everything stands after day 1. What do the Raiders need to do? Where do they need to turn their attention in day 2 and moving forward as they continue throughout the offseason? We'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, just kind of recapping everything that happened on Monday as the Raiders came to agreement on a bunch of different deals, a handful of deals. And, of course, they lost a few players as well. None of the deals can be official until Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time when the new league year opens up. So we'll do a recap of that coming up here in segment number 1 after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. And about 45 minutes into the legal negotiation period open up, we found out the news that the Raiders, in fact, came to an agreement with defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, formerly of the Miami Dolphins. Gets a 4-year deal worth $110 million base value that includes $84.75 million guaranteed. And we knew that the market was going to be very big. We knew that Wilkins was going to sign a huge deal, but I know that I thought that it was a great move for the Raiders. I still think it's a great move for the Raiders. And now you add a dude like him at the defensive tackle position. The guy had 65 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 23 quarterback hits, 9 sacks, 58 pressures, and 35 stops in 2023. You put that next to Max Crosby. You put that next to Tyree Wilson. You put that next to Malcolm Kuntz. You're doing okay. You're doing all right. Now, do the Raiders still need to make some additions on the defensive line, some rotational pieces to go in behind them? Sure, no doubt about it. But Christian Wilkins is a guy who rarely comes off the field. He's a 3-down, defensive lineman, a defensive tackle. He's great against the run. He's always been great against the run. And last year he was outstanding getting after the quarterback, having 9 sacks as well. So if the Raiders could continuously get pressure from the interior, especially going up against Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert twice a year, they're going to be in a much better position, especially Mahomes. He loves to step up in the pocket. And if you're going to beat Mahomes consistently, you got to have that pressure. You know what Max is going to bring to the table. Him and Wilkins, they have that motor that does not stop. So that's going to be a great 1-2 punch on the Raiders defensive line. I like that. If you break down the contract a little bit more, go to Spotrac.com. I checked it out. 4 years, $110 million, $57.5 million guaranteed at signing. Another $20.25 million next March. 3 years, $84.25 million is the practical money. And still, even though that's not a whole hell of a lot as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people were looking at it like, yeah, I don't know. That's an overpay. I always laugh when I see people talk about overpaying as free agency money. If the Raiders have it or any other team has it, why not spend it, right? The salary cap continues to go up each and every year. If teams want to find a way to keep a player on their roster 9 times out of 10, they normally do. But let me just go ahead and update you on the cap hits. For 2024, $11.5 million. 2025, $35, which is obviously a much bigger hit. 2026, $31.75, and 2027, $31.75. So as far as I'm looking at it, the next couple years, 11.5 is nothing. 2025, I'm sure that they'll probably restructure him, put him in a position where it's not such a big cap hit. But excited about the addition of Christian Wilkins, only 28 years old, and now Max Crosby as a running buddy. And I think this really makes Tyree Wilson that much better as well, especially if they end up lining Tyree Wilson up in the interior as well. And you have Wilson going up against the guard, and you have Christian Wilkins going up against the guard. All of a sudden, you're in a really good position on that Raiders defensive line. I think that looks really nasty and pretty scary for opposing quarterbacks. So that's something to get excited about. I think all of Raider Nation got pretty excited about that deal. Now, a deal that Raider Nation did not get excited about, or at least I think that they're pretty 50-50, maybe split on, maybe a little 70-30, whatever the case may be, is the fact that the Raiders agreed to a deal with quarterback Gardner Minshew. Now, he is not a guy that I had on my radar. I think a couple people had reached out and said something about what about Gardner Minshew. I think people called in on the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, and I thought that there was no doubt that Gardner Minshew was going to stay in Indianapolis and back up Anthony Richardson after having to play 13 games last season for the Colts when Anthony Richardson went down due to injury. He threw for over 3,000 yards. He is not an end-all, be-all quarterback. He is not some guy I'm going to do a backflip and get all excited. I'm not going to try to sell you on the fact that, oh, man, the Raiders got the best quarterback out there, but signing him to a 2-year deal, $25 million deal that includes $15 million fully guaranteed, it's basically $7.5 million a year for a guy who's insurance. I don't think that that's really a big deal. I think him and Aiden O'Connell will definitely compete, but I think it most importantly shows that the Raiders are dedicated to getting a quarterback in the draft. I believe they'll do everything they can in their power to get up to the 2 to 3 range to go get their guy in Jaden Daniels. Now, that's not saying that that's going to happen for sure, but I do think they'll try everything in their power to get to that 2 to 3 range. If that doesn't work, well, then they'll get someone else. But I think that the moves that they've made so far shows for a fact that they're going to go into the draft and get a quarterback that they believe is not a Band-Aid, because Gardner Minshew is a Band-Aid. 2-year deal, $15 million fully guaranteed. That is Band-Aid material every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I didn't get up in arms about it. A lot of Raider Nation did freak out. I did not. I just think that they needed a veteran in the quarterback room. Nobody wanted Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's in Pittsburgh. That's fine. I know nobody wanted Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold actually agreed to a 1-year deal in Minnesota with the Vikings. Jacoby Brissett went back to New England on a 1-year deal. You know, Kirk Cousins signed for a massive deal or agreed to a massive deal in Atlanta. I don't think anyone in the Raider Nation wanted to see that either. So not a big selection of guys to choose from. Tyrod Taylor's going to the Jets to back up Aaron Rodgers. So, I mean, again, there wasn't a whole bunch of names, which is what I've been talking about from the jump. So I really didn't know where they were going to go with the veteran move. And, oh, by the way, Justin Fields is still in Chicago. They can't find a trade partner. So there's that. Moving on with a little bit of a recap of what happened Monday as far as the Raiders were concerned with the legal negotiation period. The Raiders lose running back Josh Jacobs to the Packers. This was a surprise for me. I did not see this coming. I thought there was no doubt about it. The Raiders were going to bring him back. Didn't think that the deal was going to be a huge deal. On the surface, it looked like Josh Jacobs got a big-time deal, 4 years, $48 million deal with $12.5 million guaranteed. But when you break it down, which is what you really have to do with some of these contracts, the 4-year Josh Jacobs contract is actually a 1-year deal with 3 team-held options for 2025, 2026, and 2027. No guaranteed money beyond the first year. So I don't think that that's really a great deal for Josh. And so I am assuming that maybe the Raiders didn't offer him anything close to that. I know Vinny Bonsignore had reached out to him right after the news broke that he was going to Green Bay and said, man, congratulations on the deal. Gonna hate not covering you anymore. You're a good dude. And he basically let it be known that, hey, I tried everything in my power to stay with the Raiders. It just didn't happen. So I don't know what Tom Telesco and company were offering Josh Jacobs, but it couldn't have been a whole lot because the deal he got from the Packers is not really a big deal. Again, it looks like a good deal, 4 years, $48 million, but when it's all said and done, there's no guaranteed money past this year, and there's a team option for 2025, 2026, and 2027. So it could be a series of 1-year deals for Josh Jacobs. That's not the only guy that they lost on Monday. The Raiders also lost offensive lineman Jermaine Illuminor. He agrees to a deal with the Giants. It's expected to be a 2-year, $14 million deal. I don't have the breakdowns on that one, but he reunites with Carmen Brasillo, who was the Raiders offensive line coach last year. Brasillo is now in New York with the Giants, so it made sense that Illuminor would follow him there. So a nice raise for Illuminor, who only made $3 million for the Raiders last season, is getting a 2-year, $14 million deal with the Giants. Again, I don't know the details and the guaranteed money, but I'm assuming it's more than the $3 million he made last season with the silver and black. And they were not done there. The Raiders also lost Bilal Nichols to the Cardinals. So I mentioned that the Raiders have to do some work as far as rotational pieces behind Christian Wilkins. Bilal Nichols was a really good rotational piece for the Raiders in 2023. So I don't think it's the end-all, be-all loss, but I do think it's a loss. Again, I think he played a nice role. Matter of fact, I think that guys like Adam Butler, John Jenkins, of course, Bilal Nichols, all played a nice role in that defensive tackle room. Again, they weren't anything fantastic, but they did their job. They did a good enough job, and Bilal Nichols is going to be missed, to a certain extent. So, obviously, like I said, the Raiders still need to address the defensive tackle, get a little bit more rotation behind Wilkins. But if you tell me that you're going to lose Bilal Nichols, you're going to pick up Christian Wilkins, I'll do it every day of the week and twice on Sundays. Still a huge pickup, and the Raiders have plenty of time to go ahead and address the defensive tackle. Plus, they have guys in the mix that they have there, like a Byron Young, right? A guy that they drafted in the third round out of Alabama who didn't get any burn last season. So obviously he's going to probably get an opportunity to get some burn. They had a couple guys on the practice squad that are playing the defensive tackle role that they can slide back up there and compete for some rotational opportunity. So we'll see what happens there. But Bilal Nichols goes to the Cardinals on a 3-year, $21 million deal that includes $14.4 million guaranteed, again, with the Arizona Cardinals. So that really is the basic recap for day one as far as the legal negotiation period for the Raiders. A couple running backs that are available, and we'll talk about them because Josh Jacobs is gone. Once Josh Jacobs agreed to a deal with the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Jones became available. They decided they were going to release him. Derrick Henry is still out there, so if the Raiders decided they wanted to go with a veteran running back to add with Zamir White, they could do that. And also, Joe Mixon was released by the Cincinnati Bengals, but we'll get more into that coming up in segment number 2. But just side note, just in case the Raiders decide they want to go with a vet, Zamir White, I think he proved a lot at the end of the season when he was filling in for Josh Jacobs and probably made him a lot more expendable. So JJ, I'll miss him. He's one of my favorite Raiders. I thought he was a professional. He was the guy that really filled a void when the Raiders had a whole lot of questions to be answered, where he was an identity when the Raiders didn't know who their identity was or what their identity was. So that's unfortunate. But again, he's on his way to the Packers, and business is business. And that's how it goes in the National Football League. So what do the Raiders need to do moving forward? That's coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. We'll get to that after I tell you about the title sponsor of this show, which is FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. I don't know how much you've been paying attention, but the conference championship games have been a lot of fun. They continue to be a lot of fun, and it's just getting us ready for March Madness. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and more. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. What do the Raiders do on day 2 of the legal negotiation period as they prepare for the start of the new league year, which comes up on Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time on the 13th. And, of course, that's 4 p.m. Eastern as well. That's when all these deals that are being agreed upon can become official. And the one thing I'll say is there's always at least one deal that does not go through. I'm not saying for the Raiders, but in general, there's always at least one deal that doesn't go through. Either the player has a change of heart, the team comes back with another deal and they decide to stay there, or something happens, a failed physical, something always happens where a deal falls through. So just remember that nothing is official until it actually is, coming up on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. But as far as what the Raiders need to do, I think first and foremost, they got to attack the offensive line, especially after losing Jermaine Illuminor. He was a guy that at least he wasn't a world beater. He wasn't fantastic, but you knew he could slide in at the right tackle. He could be the right guard. If he had to play the left tackle position, he could. He was very versatile, and that was good. He's on the way to New York. I don't know where Thayer Munford lays, what his name and what he brings to the table, where he is in the pecking order. I know that he told me and Vinny Bonsignore that in the locker room that he was more comfortable at the left tackle position. Obviously, that's the spot that Colton Miller is holding down. So you got Colton Miller, you got Dylan Parham, you got Andre James. But what do you have at the right side? The right guard and the right tackle need to be addressed. Again, I don't know where Thayer Munford comes in this equation, but he obviously has to fit in there somewhere. One guy that I was looking at and was hoping that the Raiders were going to make a move for was Robert Hunt from Miami. He ended up going to the Panthers, or agreeing to a deal with the Panthers. 5 years, $100 million, $44 million guaranteed, another $10 million next March. 3 years, $63 million is the practical money. And a lot of people were like, when I said that on Twitter, I said, I was hoping the Raiders would be in line for him. Not for that money, not for that money. Again, I'm not worried about free agency money. If the Raiders have it or any other team has it, so what? Go spend it, right? If that shores up your offensive line, what are we talking about? What's the big deal? And $44 million guaranteed at signing, $63 million practical over 3 years. It's not too bad as far as I'm concerned. 2024, his cap hit is only $6.45 million. 2025, it goes up to $21 million, which is obviously more. 2026, 24, 27 is $24 million, and 28 is $23 million. But by then, there'll be some restructures in line. But Robert Hunt, not a big deal. He's off to the Panthers. I thought that would have been a really good guy to slide in there at that guard position and really help upgrade the Raiders' offensive line. Also, at the tackle position, Mike Onwenu decided to stay with the New England Patriots. They gave him a 3-year, $57 million deal with $38 million guaranteed. So both of those guys I thought would be a nice 1-2 punch on the right side of the Raiders' offensive line. They got to get that shored up. They really do. They've got to find a way, and it's been a turnstile at the right side for a while, ever since the Raiders dismantled their offensive line when they went to try to build up their offense, when Gruden was still the head coach and Gus Bradley was the defensive coordinator, and they moved on from Trent Brown, who we all know he was a 50% time participant anyway. They moved on from Gabe Jackson, and they moved on from Rodney Hudson. They saved a bunch of money so they can address the defensive side of things, and the offensive line hasn't been the same since. They need to get back to having that dominant offensive line. They have a nice solidified left side to center, but that right side is what bothers me. So I don't know. I mean, there's a handful of guys that are still available in free agency, but I don't really know if it's anyone that they're too excited about, right? I mean, again, in free agency, you're going to overspend. That's what the name of the game is. I just don't know if there's a guy out there or two guys out there that they look at and say, yeah, that's who we identify as our next right guard or our right tackle. It may be a situation where they don't attack it until the draft. Or maybe a guy like a Dalton Wagner who they had to put on IR last year, who they were pretty high on. Maybe they're waiting for him to come back. Again, maybe Thayer Munford is part of the equation. But that offensive line has to be addressed. Just like the defensive tackle had to be addressed, the offensive line is a must. You can't keep going through, year after year with a turnstile at the right side. So I don't know. I mean, I hope you're not looking for the exact answer of, oh, that's the certain guy to go get, because the certain guys that they, I thought they had an opportunity to go get were already got, right? Again, Hunt agrees to a deal with the Panthers, goes there to protect Bryce Young, and Onwenu stays there in New England with the Patriots. So, I guess it is what it is, but those are a couple of guys that need to be addressed. And obviously there needs to be, an addition to the quarterback room. That I don't think comes to the draft, though. I don't think that there's any more additions to the quarterback room. There'll be another arm added, ahead of training camp, just because that's what they're going to be, looking at. They're going to want to have 4 in training camp. But realistically, I don't believe there's another quarterback added until the draft, which who knows where they're going to get. Are they going to get up to the top 3? Are they going to get to the 5 to 7 range? Are they going to stay there at 13? Again, my pecking order with the quarterbacks in the draft: Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, and then other after that. Those are the ones that I'm looking at. But again, that's just me. I mentioned the running backs in segment number 1. With Josh Jacobs being gone, they may look to a veteran running back, Derrick Henry. I know that there's been conversations with the Ravens. Sounds like they offered him a deal for about $6 million. Aaron Jones, who was released by the Packers, it sounds like he's got a market starting with the Minnesota Vikings that could be intriguing to him. He might end up going there. And Joe Mixon getting released by the Bengals seems like it was probably a year later than what they expected. I think that they were going to move on from him last year, but then he ended up restructuring his deal to stay there. I don't know if that's a guy that Antonio Pierce would look at. I don't know how much, conversation Marvin Lewis has had with Joe Mixon, but coming from Cincinnati, it may be something to pay attention to. If they decide that they want a running back to go with Zamir White, they have Amir Abdullah. Sincere McCormick is a guy that they put on IR, so maybe they're high on him. A guy like Britton Brown is a guy that was on IR. Maybe they're high on him, and maybe they decide to get a running back later in the draft. But the one thing I saw on Monday is that a lot of running backs came off the board, and a lot of running backs got paid more money than normally they would, or at least they were last year. And a lot of that has to do with the running back class in the draft is not as deep as it normally is. But as far as I'm concerned, for my money, the number 1 priority, the number 2 priority have to be the offensive line. Got to get a right guard, got to get a right tackle. I prefer them to do it sooner rather than later so you know what direction they're going, but it may be something that kind of lingers on until the draft, and then they'll really show you and they'll see the effect of what they plan on doing. Do they plan on leaving the first round with the best offensive tackle available to them? Do they plan on leaving the first round with the best quarterback available to them? Do they look at the cornerback room? I don't really see a cornerback that the Raiders can go and add in free agency that would really push the needle for me. I just don't. Maybe there's a guy out there, but I don't really see too many. I think that the big fish that they needed to land, they did in Christian Wilkins. They went and got a veteran quarterback, which we all knew that they were going to do. And after that, it's got to be the offensive line. And then if they get anybody else, I guess that's kind of gravy. Maybe they can go and address the linebacking room. But Kenneth Murray is a guy that a lot of people thought maybe the Raiders would have some interest in because of the connection with Tom Telesco. He's off the board. He is not going to be a member of the Silver and Black. I believe he went to the Commanders. I'm not 100% sure. I forget where he went, but he is not going to be available for the Raiders. He had already agreed to a deal. And again, I forget exactly where he went. I'll have to check that out and report it back. But so there's really, like I said, on my wish list, it's all about the offensive line. If the Raiders can come out of day 2 with an agreement on at least one guy for the offensive line, either a guard or tackle, I'll be happy. And then just say, okay, they're going to either address it with somebody that's already in-house or they're going to address the rest with the draft. But somebody that's worth a salt, somebody that's good, they need to get. That's somebody that's one of the top tiers of the offensive line room. That would be in the free agent class is who I'd be looking for. But that's what I got for you for segment number 2. It's got to be 100% attention to the offensive line moving forward as far as I'm concerned. Coming up in segment number 3, what's on your mind? Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of the great sponsors here on the Locked On Raider podcast, and that is BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? I know how I'd use it. I'd probably find time to do another show. But really, the best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. That's where a lot of us really fall off. We don't really know how to make what's important our priorities. We just kind of get in a jumbled state of mind at times. So therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, you should. Give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. As you can imagine, a lot of reaction to day 1 of the legal negotiation period, including the call from Julian in Moraga. He's calling to talk about the first day of the period and what his overall thoughts were, and has a question for me as well. Here he is, Julian in Moraga.
What a great day for Raider Nation. Gotta love the Wilkins signing. I feel like that is a game changer for our team. Sad to see some of the free agents go, like Illuminor, Blau Nichols, even though I'd rather see Adam Butler resign. Those are some guys in the trenches that I think were serviceable, but they got paid, so good for them. Of course, seeing J.J. Walk is a big loss for the Raiders, but he got the bag, and he'll do well over in Green Bay, so wishing him nothing but the best. Really excited to see. Wanted to get your thoughts on what the targets would be for the rest of the year. Personally, I think they got to beef up the O-line. They got to go right tackle, right guard. And then I'm still thinking they need a corner to round out that secondary. Love your thoughts. Love the show. Best listen of the day. Thanks. Oh, again, it's Julian from Moraga.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And, I think that the Raiders did great with the addition of Wilkins. I think that was obviously priority number 1. Antonio Pearson mentioned that at the Combine, that he wanted to have that big-time presence, that guy that can rush the quarterback from the interior and obviously stop the run. That's who Wilkins is. Minshew, in my opinion, is fine for insurance. It's nothing to write home about, but he's insurance. I'm not going to ever try to sell him as some fantastic quarterback. I know some Raider Nation is flipping out about it. I'm not worried about it. I hate losing Josh Jacobs, but that's business in the NFL. He made a business decision. The Raiders made a business decision. The offensive line, as I mentioned in segment number 2, it's got to be the biggest priority. Illuminor headed to New York. I think that's a big deal. The Raiders' depth takes a hit for sure. So, again, offensive line, I don't like to beat a dead horse, but offensive line has to be a priority. I'm not sure exactly who it is, but it's got to be a priority. Thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. Up next, a text from Raider 783 in Fresno, California. It's a pretty lengthy text. Hey, Q, Now that I've recently retired and don't have to listen to you on my drives from Fresno to San Francisco, I actually am missing listening to you in the mornings. Thanks again for the great job you do. Extremely little of what you put out there is what I disagree with, except the previously mentioned Andre Holmes, but we'll leave that dead horse alone. That's funny. You just pause real quick. I haven't talked about Andre Holmes in a long time, but that's funny. It seems like to be the hot button with people all the time whenever I mention Andre Holmes. But anyway, continuing with the text. First off, very excited about the signing of Wilkins. I feel like we're getting a really good player who will play well and fit in well with the team. Unlike not so long ago when the Raiders lunged at talented but motivationally or maturity challenged players like Trent and Antonio Brown. Second, I'm sad and disappointed to see Jacobs leave. I think that McDaniel and Ziegler dropped the ball there by not signing him to a 3-year deal for similar money last year. Same for the Giants and Barkley. It took some arm twisting, but I think the Colts did a smart thing with Taylor's deal, which is what I wanted for Jacobs. Speaking of Colts running back, maybe Zach Moss can pair up with Zamir this season. I'll pause right there. Zach Moss is in Cincinnati now. He headed to Cincinnati. That's what made Joe Mixon available. That's why they released Joe Mixon. All right, moving on with the text. Third and last for now, the quarterbacks. I've always liked Jacoby Brissett, but Minshew is right on his heels for quarterbacks that I like for the role that Minshew was signed for, so I'm good with it. As for drafting the quarterback, I'm all for Jaden Daniels or Caleb or Drake May, but if the trade demands or availability don't pan out, I'm a fan of Penix ever since I watched him play as a junior, and his senior season just made me like him more. Not sure what he offers as a play extender, run ability, but the rest of his game looked good to me. And please don't feel the need to over-explain what a mobile quarterback is. I understood you the first time and agree completely. Today's top quarterbacks provide at least some threat with their ability to move and run. Keep up the good work. That's Raider 783 in Fresno, Cali. Thanks so much. Congratulations on your retirement off top. And second of all, I agree with just about everything you said. Right? Zach Moss, as I mentioned, he's on the way to the Bengals. Jacoby Brissett agreed to a deal with the Patriots, but I think Minshew's fine for insurance. Again, I'm not someone that I'm getting excited about, not someone that was on my radar for the Raiders to sign as a veteran, but at $7.5 million a year guaranteed for the next 2 years, I don't think it's a big deal. And it's a guy that's been there, done that. I think he's got like a 22-27 overall record as far as win-loss, where a guy like Justin Fields is 11-29 in his career. And I get it. The situations were different, Chicago and Jacksonville and obviously the Colts, the Colts. But Minshew went in and was put into a position where he had to follow up Anthony Richardson, who was given the start there, and played 13 games, started 13 games and threw for over 3,000 yards. Was it fantastic? No, but he had the Colts right there on the edge of potentially making it to the playoffs. They just fell a little bit short. But yeah, I'm with you as far as quarterbacks in the draft. Jaden Daniels is QB1 for me. Michael Penix, I think he's fantastic. The way that he's able to throw the ball down the field, he's very accurate. He doesn't provide a whole lot as far as scrambling ability, but he can get out of there and he can move the pocket a little bit if need be. But more importantly, man, a team with a strong run game like I expect the Raiders to have and the ability to stretch the field, Michael Penix would do a really good job. But again, Jaden Daniels is QB number 1 to me until he's not. That would mean that they have to have a trade partner up to number 2 in the draft as far as I'm concerned, and there's no guarantee that they'll be able to get that. But thanks so much for that text. Appreciate you. It's great to hear from you. Up next, got a call from Andrew in the 406. He's calling to talk about the Raiders draft and what he thinks the Raiders' priorities will be based off of free agency the first day of the legal negotiation period. Here he is, Andrew in the 406.
Man, I'm not sure if I'm getting the Locked On Raiders podcast number, but it's the number that you put out on your phone. My name is Andrew from the 406. And just want to say we should be able to try to forecast what we are going to look for and do in the draft based on these free agency signings that we are doing right now with Gardner Minshew, Christian Wilkins. It kind of paves the path as to what we're going to do and what we want to do. So, with the limited amount of possibilities that are out there, what should we do? Quarterback? Cornerback? We've already filled up our D-line. Man, we are going to be monsters. Maybe linebacker. I think our receivers are stout. Tight ends are good. I think we just need to get quarterback and offensive line, and we're rolling. Well, and then since Josh Jacobs sold out and went to the Packers, might need to sign another running back. So, and I don't think Amir Abdullah will do it. But just my thoughts. Anyways, peace. Q, doing a great job. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you for the call, my man. And yeah, quarterback's a must. I believe the agreement with Minshew is a sign the Raiders will get a quarterback in the coming draft. Big time cornerback is need too to pair with Jack Jones. Remember, Amik Robertson is a free agent. There's no telling if he's coming back or not. My gut feeling tells me he's not because I don't want him back. I just think that the Raiders want someone that's a little bit bigger and maybe a little bit tougher, even though he has shown the ability to make plays. I don't know what they're going to do, where they're going to get that cornerback from. I don't see him in free agency where he's a guy that's just going to be that good. The Raiders really benefited by Jack Jones being released by the Patriots and AP having that relationship with them and him pounding the table to go get him because the Raiders weren't going to go get him. Champ Kelly said no at first, and AP kept pounding the table and said he'd put his job on the line if you go out and get Jack Jones, and they absolutely did that. Offensive line, as I mentioned in segment 2, it's a must, right? Free agency, the draft, I don't know how they're going to go get the offensive line, but they've got to do that. And then, of course, quarterback is the most obvious. When are they going to get the quarterback? How are they going to get the quarterback? Who knows? But you got to go get the quarterback to go with Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. So thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. Up next, got a text from ML Raider 209 in Stockton, Cali. Hey, Q, it's ML Raider from the 209, Stockton, California, swinging by to share my thoughts on Josh Jacobs' situation. I think it was the right moment to let him go. We all knew, or at least imagined, that he wasn't going to be re-signing with the Raiders, and not because he didn't want to be a Raider, but because they weren't going to offer him a contract like he wanted. I think we're going to be fine with Zamir White. He showed some hard running and desire to be a starter, and to be the number 1 running back for the Raiders last season. Keep up the great work. We appreciate all that you do for Raider Nation. Let me know what you think about this. Thanks, man. ML Raider out from the 209. And, yeah, that's the thing. I think that Zamir White doing what he did at the end of the season, the last 4 games that he had to fill in for Josh Jacobs, I think that was the beginning of the end for Josh. That let the Raider brass know that, hey, this guy can hold it down. Look, this guy is no scrub. I mean, he came from Georgia. He won a national championship at Georgia, so he knows how to get it done. You see his burst. You see his ability. He's got fresh legs. Obviously, he's a lot cheaper being a 4th-round draft pick, so the Raiders still have him for a couple more years. I think that they should probably add another running back to the mix just to have another guy in there. But that, could be someone that they already have on IR. That could be someone that they draft later on. That could be a veteran like a Derrick Henry, like a Joe Mixon if they so choose to go that direction. Someone like that. They can go with Aaron Jones if they want to go in that direction. I mean, there's a bunch of different options that they have. But, Zamir White has shown that he wants to have the ball in his hand. And on top of that, he's a hard guy not to root for. He's just a good dude that wants to go out there and play ball. He loves to play ball, and he's going to give everything he's got. So it's a Zamir White show until it's not in Vegas now with the Raiders. Thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Got a call from Raider Izzy. He's calling to talk about the addition of Gardner Minshew and what he thinks that means for the future of Aiden O'Connell. Here he is, Raider Izzy.
What up, Q? Raider Izzy. Wanted to call in on whole Minshew thing. That's one other thing I wanted to touch on too. I know a lot of people are upset about this. So I rarely pat myself on the back, but I'm gonna somewhat do it here. I said a while back, when the off season first started, that there's a chance that Aiden O'Connell isn't even on the roster come the season. I know that it's a small chance, and I get that a lot of people love him. I love the guy too. I really appreciate everything he did. Here's the thing, though. When you switch to a more mobile quarterback, which I do think the Raiders are going to do, whether they end up with, if it is Jaden Daniels, if it is Nix, if it is, JJ, whoever it is, aside from Penix, really, when they draft one of these guys, you have to have a backup quarterback that at least has similar traits. Reason being, the O-line will go through absolute hell. Let's say the Raiders get Jaden Daniels, okay? I'm not saying him and Gardner Minshew are the same thing. Obviously they're not, but Minshew is very athletic, all right? Let's say they draft Jaden Daniels. God forbid he gets hurt, and Minshew comes in. As far as the offensive line scheme goes, it's not all that different. They still have they know they have their quarterback that has the ability to maneuver a little bit. He might escape a pocket, whether it be clean or not. When you put in O'Connell after you've been blocking for Jaden Daniels the whole year, I mean, that is a completely different type of quarterback. You're changing everything. You're changing the whole scheme at that point. So, I mean, I love AOC. I really do. But, I mean, there's a really good chance he's the 3rd-string quarterback this year, which means he's right on the fringe. So, that is very possible. But I love the signing. I love Minshew. Also, throwing out there with Wilkins, obviously sick, love it, absolutely love it. I'm going to be that guy right now. I still want Leonard Williams. I don't really care. I get that we have Wilkins, totally different body type. I get that Tyree is going to be going in and out too. Man, I still want Leonard Williams. He wanted to be a Raider forever. I want the guy to be a Raider. I want to have a massive rotation for this D-line. If you look at the Eagles and the Niners, man, they have so many defensive linemen. I say the hell with it. Go build the bully. So in that interview that we always talk about, Pierce said, wouldn't it be great to have a couple of those heavy-handed guys in there? He said a couple. So just throwing it out there, man. Would absolutely love it. Let's keep going and keep adding these pieces, man. Absolutely love this thing. But love the show as always, bro. Later.
Thanks for the call, my man. It's always good to hear from you. And I don't think O'Connell's in danger of losing his roster spot. I really don't. I understand what you're saying, but AP told us that he's the starting quarterback. He's going to have competition, but he's the Raiders starting quarterback. I don't see him going from being the Raiders starting quarterback to all of a sudden fall into the 3-hole and just being booted off the roster. Like, I just don't see it. I think he has too much value. He's a 4th-round pick. He got some starts last season. He won some games. He's not a bad quarterback. No, he's not mobile. I get that. But he has a strong arm. He's very intelligent. He's got a rapport with the team already. I think that he's definitely got a spot on the team. Now, does that mean that he's going to be a starter? I don't know. Minshew might be the starter. I think him and O'Connell will battle it out to determine who's going to be the guy, and whoever else is added will battle it out. They probably won't be ready as a rookie. Even if it's Jaden Daniels, probably won't be ready immediately, and that's okay. That's what Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell allow you. They allow you the opportunity to ease a guy in there and put him in when they feel like he's ready. So whoever that is, whether it's day 1 or, week 8 or 9 or whenever, or right after the bye week, whatever the case may be, they don't have to force him out there on the field because he has a guy in Gardner Minshew has won some games, and Aiden O'Connell as a rookie has won some games as well. So I don't think he's in any kind of jeopardy of losing his roster spot. He's just got to battle for the starting position, and that's something that'll work itself out in training camp. Thanks so much for the call. Like I said, man, it's always great to hear from you. We'll get one more quick text. This one's from the Assassin's Ghost. He says, "Hey, Q, the Assassin Ghost here. Crazy theory. Minshew has backed up mobile quarterbacks the past few years. Trevor Lawrence isn't the fastest, but is mobile in the pocket. Jalen Hurts, mobile quarterback. This year, Anthony Richardson, mobile quarterback. I know it's a crazy theory, but maybe we are getting a mobile quarterback. I want Daniels, but something in my gut says we're getting McCarthy. What are your thoughts, Q?" That's from Assassin's Ghost. Thanks so much. And, that's the thing about it. Gardner Minshew did a really good job backing up Anthony Richardson, right? And, of course, the athletic skill set are totally different. Anthony Richardson's much more of an athlete than Gardner Minshew. Jalen Hurts is much more of an athlete than Gardner Minshew. But he does have the ability to move the pocket, pick up yards with his feet if he has to. He does have that ability. And, he was in Shane Steichen's offense last year with Indianapolis and, did some things, did some kind of modern thing offense as well. He wasn't a world beater, wasn't someone I'm excited about. But you bring up a good point. That means maybe he could back up Jaden Daniels. Maybe he can back up J.J. McCarthy. Maybe he could back up a Michael Penix. You're right? He could play a role in many different roles. And, even backing up Aiden O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell's not a mobile guy, but, Gardner Minshew doesn't have to be either. He can sit back in the pocket and just throw the ball around. So I don't think that there's any harm there either. So thanks so much for that text. That's a good theory. I'm not mad at it, and we'll see what happens. But the one thing I do know is another quarterback is on the way. I believe it's by way of the draft. Thanks so much for the text, Assassin's Ghost. It's good to hear from you. Got a call from Logan in PA. We'll get to that tomorrow. Got a lot more text to get to as well. We'll see what the news and notes happen, what happens today, if the Raiders are able to come to agreement with anyone else, if the Raiders lose anyone else to another team. We'll talk about it coming up on tomorrow's show and get ready for the new league year to open up on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.